Hello and welcome to today's ASHA Genesis R&D webinar. My name is Alicia and I'll be joined by my colleague Brian. Today we'll be discussing applications of the moisture adjustment feature in Genesis R&D with a focus on baked goods. As always, before we get into the main topic, let me give you a little background on ASHA Research. ASHA was established in 1981 and has grown from offering one of the first nutrition and labeling software solutions to a full suite of products and services, including Genesis R&D Foods that we'll be looking at today, the Genesis R&D Supplements software, the food processor for dietary analysis, and our consulting services that provides labeling services, formula review, and their expertise for customized projects. Genesis R&D Foods was introduced in 1991 to help address the need for convenient formula analysis and formatting of NLEA food labels for U.S. regulations. Over the years, Genesis has remained the go-to standard for product development, recipe analysis, and nutrition facts creation, as well as restaurant menu analysis and reporting. We offer label modules to prepare compliant labels for the US, for Canada, the EU, and for Mexico. Today we'll be demonstrating Genesis Foods version 11.10. If you have any questions about your version, your license, or your account, please get in touch with the ASHA sales team at sales@asha.com. Throughout the year, we will cover additional topics. The next few webinars are going to focus on tips for success in using Genesis. So in September, we'll provide tips to organize recipes and ingredients in Genesis, working with organizational tools like the groups and other features in the software. And in October, we'll focus on ways to search and filter through ingredients and recipes using some of those organizational tools that we'll talk about in September, as well as other settings in the software. You can register for upcoming webinars on the ASHA website in the Events tab, and from there you can also access previously recorded webinars that cover a variety of topics. As always, this webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording as well as the slide deck following the webinar. But please note, if you have any questions, go ahead and send those in right away via the control panel. Don't wait until the end. We do have colleagues standing by to help respond to your questions. And if we don't happen to get back to you during the webinar, or if your question needs a bit more research than the time allows, we'll follow up with you directly. Today we'll discuss moisture content in ingredients and recipes, the nutrients to view settings in the software, the importance of reviewing the spreadsheet report for your recipes, determining moisture content in your finished products, applying moisture adjustments in Genesis, best practices, and we'll go over some questions and answers. So to jump into the topic, why would we need to consider applying moisture adjustments to our recipes in Genesis? Ingredients and foods contain varying amounts of moisture. Not just liquid ingredients contain moisture, but even ingredients that we typically think of as dry. So things like flours and granulated or powdered ingredients also contain some amount of moisture. When we subject ingredients or the foods to heating or cooking, like with baked goods, we can expect some amount of that moisture to be lost through evaporation. So from the starting ingredients to the finished product, if moisture is lost, this can affect the nutritional content per serving of foods. In terms of the values that we see on nutrition facts panels, for some foods, just reporting the sum of the parts doesn't tell the full story of the finished food. So the processes that food has been subjected to and its final nutritional content need to be considered. We need to apply a moisture adjustment to account for the changes that take place during the baking or other methods of preparation, and in order to report the finished nutritionals accurately. When entering ingredient information from supplier spec sheets in Genesis, be sure to enter the moisture or the water content of each ingredient. And Genesis looks at the full moisture content of foods, not just free water or water that's added as an ingredient in your recipes. So it's looking at that total moisture content. In Genesis, the nutrient field that we see is called water. And on ingredient spec sheets, you may see it referred to as water, or you may see it referred to as moisture content. And the moisture content may be expressed in terms of grams or as a percent of the ingredient. So you'll want to enter the moisture information in the water field in Genesis. And as I mentioned, even most dry ingredients contain some amount of moisture. So best practice is to enter water or moisture content for all ingredients if you can. There may be a few exceptions, such as dry ingredients that contribute a very minimal amount to your recipe. But you do want to make all efforts to obtain as much ingredient information as possible. You can apply a proper moisture loss or remove moisture from your recipe if you don't have the moisture content recorded for your ingredients. And Genesis will tell you if you're trying to apply a moisture adjustment that is greater than the moisture content of the recipe. In Genesis, you can select the nutrients that you want to see on screens and on some of the reports. This is accomplished using the Nutrients to View settings in the software. The Nutrients to View includes several predetermined sets in the software already, but you can also create as many sets as you need. So for working with moisture adjustments, you do want to choose a set of nutrients to view that includes the water field. And Brian will show you how to do this in the software in just a few moments. We always stress the importance of taking a look at the spreadsheet report for all of your recipes. The spreadsheet shows the nutrient detail of the ingredients used in your recipes. And you can see in this example, the nutrients to view set that I have selected includes water. And you can also notice there are dashes in the water value for the sugar ingredient. So you want to use the spreadsheet report to review the nutrient values and determine if any are missing. Here you'll see as indicated with the dashes. If you do find that values are missing, you want to research the ingredient and fill in the missing values in the ingredient record. So when you obtain the data that you need for the water content or the moisture content, go back to the ingredient record, update the ingredient record, and any updates that you make to that ingredient are carried forward to the recipes that you use that ingredient. Once you have the moisture information for your ingredients and you've entered all that information, updated records as needed, you'll want to apply a moisture adjustment to the recipes that it makes sense. So if it's appropriate due to the processing, the cooking methods that that food undergoes, you want to apply the appropriate moisture adjustment. And there are a few ways you can determine the moisture adjustment to be applied to your recipes. One is to obtain lab analysis of the moisture content of your finished item, finished product, and that will give you a target moisture amount. If you use instrumentation or a way to measure the moisture content of your food, that's another way to arrive at a target amount, that finished product moisture content. Or you can calculate moisture loss by using before and after weights of a food portion or a batch of the product to determine that moisture loss. For instance, if you weigh a portion of dough and then you bake that portion and weigh the baked product, that difference in before and after weights can be, if it can be attributed to moisture loss only, then that difference in the before and after weights gives you the moisture loss to be applied. Again, I say that if it can be attributed to a loss of moisture only. Sometimes there's a lot happening with the food and processing affects the food in different ways. But here, if before and after weights give you that value of moisture content that's lost, then that's a viable way to enter a moisture loss with the software. To apply the moisture adjustment in Genesis, once you've determined the amount lost or determined the target moisture amount, you can enter this information using the Edit Yields feature. And working with this feature, you can enter a moisture adjustment in terms of a loss, or you can set a target amount. And you can enter the loss or target in terms of weight or in terms of percent. So just know in Genesis, if you're entering a loss in terms of percent, Genesis needs to know what amount of the moisture content of your recipe was lost. So just know how Genesis is speaking, what terms. And the yield adjustment screen, as you can see here, shows you the original moisture content. So you have that beginning reference. And then based on the water values of the ingredients that you've entered for your recipe, so you have that original content. And then when you apply a moisture adjustment, you'll see that reflected in your recipe. So just to review the checklist of best practices when working with the moisture adjustments, when entering ingredients in Genesis, include moisture information in the water field. If the ingredient spec sheets do not report moisture information, contact your suppliers to obtain information so that you can fill in the blanks. Review your recipes and ingredients with the spreadsheet report to look for the missing values, and use the check data feature in Genesis to review mathematical checks on the recipe values. One of the checks that Genesis will look at is the weight. So the components that contribute to the weight of a food or your recipe serving include water, ash, protein, carbs, fat, and then alcohol. So make sure that all of those are populated, and especially your water content, so that you can use the check data feature to run a mathematical check on your numbers. Document any adjustments and the supporting information needed. So you can use the notes field in your recipe. You can attach documents to your files in Genesis, but you just want to make a clear record of any lab analysis or measured information that you have obtained, and have that as part of your adjustments documentation. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Brian to show you the features and the examples in Genesis.
Good afternoon. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to change the nutrients to view. As Alicia mentioned earlier, we're going to go home and to nutrients to view. Okay, if I look at what I'm currently looking at here, it's going to be the US mandatory. So now I want to modify this. I want to modify it and add water to this grouping. So now I'm going to go to edit, find the water, and then bring it over onto this screen. Okay, and this is true of any of these nutritional attributes. Click OK, and I'm going to save as. Okay. So now I've added water to my mandatory ingredients. This is we're actually going to be making a pastry today. This is the raw pastry dough here. For the finished product, we're going to add the filling to it and then do the bake off at the end. Before the dough, I want to take a look at my reports, look at my spreadsheet, and make sure that my water information is in there. And 1 second here. There we go. And I'll go back to my reports, look at spreadsheet, and you can see my water here. In this case, I'm actually missing the salt. As Alicia mentioned, some items are going to have such a low level that they may not be tested for. The other thing with salt is the amounts you're adding in is very small, but I want to check and make sure that my major ingredients do have a water content there. Okay, let's go into, I'm going to bring up now a filled pastry. Again, this is going to be raw. And a view label here. So now I've got a formulation where I've got my cherry filling and my pastry dough. Both of these are, the cherry filling is pre-cooked, but it's going to lose water to boil off. And then my pastry is going to lose moisture to baking. Now, if I look at my edit yields here, right now I'm at 42.40% moisture, okay? As Alicia mentioned, there's a couple of ways to find out what your target number is or your loss. Mass balance being the easiest one. This is how much product we put into the oven. This is how much came out. In that case, it's going to be water loss to it. The other way would be with the moisture analyzer, where you do the entire product. It can tell you what the actual moisture content of your finished product is. So I can do it either way. I can take a loss based off of this percentage, and I could say that I'm going to lose 50% of that, right, which would bring my total down to 21% roughly. The other way to do this is to do it by pounds. So I can do it by a weight measure. It's telling me that I have 169 pounds of water in there. I could lose 50 pounds in my mass balance. Third way is by target. So if you do have a moisture analyzer and you know what your target product is, you could put it in here and it will automatically remove the water for that. So in the case of like a breakfast cereal, a cracker, you may know that your target's 3%, 5%. You could put that in. For a baked item, you know, you're in the 25 to 30 range for a sweet product, you could put that in. All right. So in this case, I'm actually going to put in that my target is 32%. And if you look at my label here, we're going to remove the water, so my nutritionals are going to go up. You can see that the values all go up because I'm removing the water, which is a dilutant to it. All right. If I do it on a loss method in the same way, so I could go that I'm losing 69 pounds. Click OK. It's going to have the same effect. It's going to change the values on that. And I can see that my target, or actually my actual moisture here, is down from there. All right, I'm going to turn this back to Alicia. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Brian. So in addition to webinars, in this format that we present here, we also offer formal instruction on the software. The Genesis R&D training classes dive much deeper into working with the software features, as well as discussion on regulations and specific scenarios. We do offer 2-day professional and 1-day advanced level courses, or combine these into a 3-day class option. The typical training covers the fundamentals of using Genesis R&D, as well as FDA label creation and regulations. The advanced day builds upon the features and topics covered in the professional class and can be attended as a single-day option if you already attended the professional level course. We have upcoming online and in-person trainings scheduled. In September and November, the in-person classes resume at the ASHA Oak Brook Training Center. With that in mind, please check the ASHA website, and we'll be posting updates and more information, more details about what to expect with the upcoming classes. The full training schedule, registration, and again, other details are available on the ASHA website. And of course, you can contact the training team if you have any questions about the offerings or the arrangements for upcoming classes. And if your organization needs to schedule a group training for your specific needs, either online or in person, please contact training@asha.com. And you can stay in touch with ASHA in a variety of ways. If you need to get in touch with our sales team, support, or consulting teams, please reach out by phone or email. We also invite you to join us in the ASHA LinkedIn community, and you can find additional resources and subscribe to our blog and newsletter on the ASHA website. So with that, we'll switch over to some Q&A, so I'll hand that back over to Brian.
So one of the questions is, does it matter if I set a moisture loss or a moisture target?
So not necessarily, or depends. Loss or target is based on what you know, like Brian showed. So if you determine by difference the before and after moisture content, you can apply an adjustment in terms of a loss. But again, if you obtain lab analysis or take a measurement of the moisture content of the finished product, then you have a target amount. So whichever number supports the method that you're going to apply the adjustment, that will help shape the adjustment that you do make.
Next question is, in Genesis, what's the difference between the moisture adjustment, the fat adjustment, and the processing adjustment?
Great question. We do get this from time to time. And here we've focused on the moisture adjustment in this webinar. Genesis also allows you to apply a fat loss. So that's similar in concept to a moisture loss, but of course, applying to fat. Think of bacon. We cook bacon and you can clearly see that it's losing a great amount of fat. And so if you know the amount of fat that is being lost and you know that that is like with moisture, if we contribute the difference to the moisture loss with fat, if you can contribute a measurable amount to fat loss, then you can enter that amount as a fat loss or a target amount in the fat loss feature in the yield adjustments. And then the processing loss, it was intended for if you have a total or a portion of a total batch that is being lost, for instance, on the production line. So if you start with an amount of dough in the batch and part of that dough is left behind on the production line, the processing loss will take a part of the entire batch and allow you to record that as a loss. So it might be that you're tracking the yield of a batch, knowing that a certain amount is left behind on equipment, or if you're tracking costs and you want to determine what is the cost of that loss, then those are ways to use the processing loss in Genesis.
How do I determine moisture loss for a fried food where fat is also being absorbed?
So that is a great question. And when you have a product that experiences more than just moisture loss, like a fried item where the difference in weight may be due to multiple factors like moisture loss as well as oil or fat absorption, in that type of case, if you can measure the oil uptake, then you may be able to work with the numbers and estimate moisture and moisture loss and the oil absorption. But otherwise, you may need to attain lab analysis to pinpoint moisture and fat content in the finished product. So with the label, we want to know the finished fat amount to report on the label. So it may be that you need to analyze for fat and or moisture content.
What about moisture loss in jellies, jams, and preserves? Can I use the moisture adjustment feature for those?
Yes, so things like jams, jellies, sauces, anything again where we're cooking off, moisture is evaporating in that process, the moisture loss applies to those types of foods as well. And again, determining the moisture loss can be accomplished in the same idea of either lab analysis, a measurement, or before and after weights of the batch to determine how much moisture has been lost or to arrive at a target amount. And you can apply the adjustment in Genesis just like we've shown. And then Brian, we did have one more question, so I'll go ahead and take that one. Someone did ask about moisture or water absorption, especially like with pastas. So when you have an item or a food that is absorbing water rather than losing moisture, the yield adjustments feature is not designed to be used for that. So pasta, you would add to your recipe. So say you start with your dry pasta and you add the amount of water that is absorbed. That's one approach, keeping in mind that when you're working with pasta, you may have starches that are drained. So if you cook the pasta, add the amount of water, but then you drain it, you may be losing starches, which could affect carbohydrates, sugars. You know, those are certainly considerations to think about. And then in Genesis, we do have examples from the USDA of pasta in dry form as well as in cooked form. It does use averaged factors of the moisture absorption, but at least they are references that you could take a look at. But moisture absorption is a different approach to arriving at the finished product than what we're talking about here with the moisture loss.
Excellent. Well, thank you for attending and for all of your questions. We do have a few questions that are more specific. They're asking about more specific scenarios and measures and so on, but we will respond to those directly. But other than that, thank you and have a great day.